As I talk about qualities of a qualitative, culturally responsive researcher, make notes to yourself about what qualities you think are important, and then any other qualities that you might add that aren't on this list. Now, this list, of course, is my thoughts, and certainly much of it is gleaned from the literature, but there could be many other things on this list. I started making this list during the sequestered part of COVID-19. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and it's something we always discuss in my courses. And so I made little flashcards, if you will, and my kids and I would sort them and subsort them to say, well, is this quality part of this quality? Because I was trying to narrow it down to which ones I could fit into an actual textbook, because you only have so much room. So when I began to write the textbook on an introduction to qualitative research in a culturally responsive context, I was only able to use a certain amount of them, and that's the ones you see here today. And some of them are integrated into some other parts of the textbook, such as the section on reflexivity. I'm going to suggest that some of the major qualities could be reflexive, curious, caring, trustworthy, responsive, flexible, joyful, humble, intrepid, and becoming. And then I will only review joyful given time. Joyful. I think of this quality as seen in one who researches their joy and can experience and relish moments of research in joy. Now, excuse me, moments of joy in research. Now, this certainly does not mean that we only research things that are good or full of joy, because we don't really understand joy unless we understand sadness or the badness. You cannot feel joy if we've never felt sorrow. The two are connected together. Researching your joy allows research to renew and sustain us. Khalil Gibran said, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked." So take a moment, pause the video here, and create a list of what gives you joy. You can also take a screenshot of this and do the writing later if you're not in a position to write. Joy without sorrow is seen as merely pleasure. So maybe something like you eat a bite of chocolate, or the great scent of coffee, or a runner's high after they run. This is a moment of pleasure. It's a more fleeting sensation. We see this idea borne out in major spiritual and religious beliefs across history and the globe. Poets, philosophers, and spiritual writers have long described the inseparable nature of joy and sorrow. So, for instance, the Buddha says, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and sorrow come and go like the wind. To be happy, rest like a giant tree in the midst of them all. And an exemplar of joy, Dr. Muhammad, writing in the context of critical pedagogical research with Black children, said, criticality is a pursuit that teaches students the ability to name, understand, question, interrupt, and ultimately dismantle oppression, including racism. Black joy involves a collection of memories of resistance, trauma, survival, love, and cultural expression. And that when we center joy, it allows Black children to see not just pain and struggle, but hopes and aspirations. In this research, Dr. Muhammad sought to understand what is joy and why does it matter for education, particularly for Black youth? How can joy be cultivated alongside nurturing students' genius? How do genius and joy look in a classroom learning through lesson examples? So this is an amazing exemplar of joy in research. And I think this is a final quote. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And this is from the Jewish and Christian Psalms 35. So take a moment to write a reflexive researcher journal entry about what gives you joy in research. Again, you can pause here, or you can take a screenshot if you want to do the writing at a later moment. Dr. Venus Evan Williams has a powerful book that I have the privilege of teaching in my narrative inquiry class, Black Feminism in Qualitative Inquiry, a mosaic for writing our daughters' bodies. In this text, Dr. Evans Williams articulates daughtering as a way to center one aspect of Black girls' and women's stories. In Dr. Evans Winter's text, daughtering represents Black girls' relationships with their family and the larger community. Dr. Evans Williams offers that Black girls' families and communities teach them to support their household and be advocates who stand up for vulnerable people in their neighborhood. Through the perspective of daughtering and Black feminism, researchers may better understand these women's experiences. Now, daughtering, as it's articulated with Black feminism, would be an example of a culturally responsive methodology that Black feminist researchers could pull on when they develop their research. However, there's a richness with this when we engage in scholarship from other people. And when I was giving this webinar for another group, one of the women in the group was Latina. And she said to me, "Oh, I can see how she could draw on that from the powerful Chicana feminism that she was articulating in her group. And within her group, she was studying Latina sisters. And so she said she thought she could look at it as sistering. She was looking at this sister relationship. And I think that's such a powerful example that she indicated that I could share of how one culturally responsive methodology can inspire another concept. And if you have a sense of safety within your research, a sense of mental stability, and you notice that your your identities are not reflected in research methodology, these are amazing examples of how you can bring that to the field of narrative inquiry or another methodology, and you can begin to alter that and infuse that and move it away from being a standard white man, a standard white type of methodology. So I end with some actionable reflexive takeaways. Again, this would be a great one to screenshot. You will have the accompanying slideshows, this PowerPoint in general also. And some things to think about that you could journal about. Can you commit to making an entry in a research journal once a week, several times a week, about your intent to craft culturally responsive research? What kind of questions do you have? What types of resources? How might you need to work for different relationship connections and find resources that you don't have? What can you commit to reading, following, attending, or doing that will deepen your culturally responsive qualitative research understandings? So, for example, and I don't say this in a flip way at all, we are such busy scholars. One thing I could suggest is podcasts. So, if you do research, for example, with Indigenous people, and you're an outsider, or you're an Indigenous academic who wants to deepen your understandings, there are very rich podcasts about both research with Indigenous people and the Indigenous people, most likely in the regions you come from. So I have two places where I've lived that have two very different histories. And I've been able to find rich podcasts that help me dig in and understand more closely. And so this is a commitment that you might find more easier depending on what's going on with you, sometimes in the deeper reading. If it is going to be your research area, obviously you need to develop actual connections with people, particularly if you're an outsider. You could also consider volunteering for author aid, and this is really directed at the ones of us who have started to publish research and have a very clear understanding of how publication work. And this is a global group that works with helping people understand the publication system, because we can never get around the fact that the publication system is dominated by English. English, of course, is dominant because of colonization. And so as someone that's a colonizer, a settler, even if you're not a white person, but English is your dominant language, this is a contribution that you can give to help those that have to write in second or third, fourth languages in order for them to attain tenure and promotions. And so this is a wonderful, free, voluntarily run global network that provides support for researchers in learning how to publish their research. Consider the qualities of a qualitative research. What qualities would you add to this list? Excuse me, of a qualitative researcher. What qualities would you add to this list? Which of these qualities do you feel like you have in abundance? Which of these qualities do you have but could cultivate more? Which of these qualities are not ones you think of yourself as having, and how could you grow in these areas? The reference and resource list. And then please be sure to see the related course, Culturally Responsive Qualitative Research, Part 2. And in this one, I'm going to cover the qualitative research quality of humility, creating a comprehensive, culturally responsive literature review. And this type of literature review is for any kind of researcher, quantitative, mixed methods. And I would argue possibly cracking open the literature review and beginning to consider it in culturally responsive ways could be one of the strongest ways to start to dismantle oppression, because we know how we pass knowledge down through the traditional literature review. And so if we could look at this through more perspectives, I would argue that this can be a foundational way to move research to being more culturally responsive. I will also briefly look at co-research and collaborative research and have some methodological exemplars. And I'm excited to say we'll be joined by Stefan Bond, who has a PhD in music education, for a guest cameo looking at a rich metaphor for research from a Black American perspective.